Ah, here he
There
comes.
he's in.
There he is.
This is Brian.
Hey, Sam.
Hi,
Hey, Brian.
Brian.
So I have a PowerPoint,
Ready,
Michelle.
everybody's here.
I don't know if you want to do a share screen or if I can share a screen. Go.
Nick, why don't you give us a rundown on the new pickup that you need?
All right. So, I'll just do a PowerPoint and you guys can, we'll go through it that way, but it starts with the pickup. It goes through all the items.
Okay, I was going to start with the pickup. Is that
All right.
okay?
Let's start there. Let me know. So, are you guys looking at the PowerPoint?
Yeah,
Okay,
I can
great.
see it.
All right, so just quickly overview of all items we have for tonight. There's the slope mower, the stand-up mowers, bucket truck, wood chipper, the Bobcat recently added, which is not it's already funded, but it's because it's over $10,000 in enduring value, more than
Yeah.
18 months. You guys are going to review it. The
Understand.
salt shed, I saved the best for last, and then the pickup truck. So we'll start with the pickup truck.
Yeah,
So the request is for a Dodge 2500 Ram pickup truck. Capital request is $59,000. It's replacing the existing 1997 Ford, which you can see in the upper left and on the right pictures. That vehicle is beyond its end of life. We squeaked by to get an inspection sticker last year, but it failed, and it has an expired sticker now, and it will not pass again. It's hard to see in the lower right picture, but you could put your feet through the floorboards, and it's just significant rot elsewhere. There's two gas tanks in it. One was abandoned a few years ago because it was leaking, and MacGyver at DPW bypassed it, so we're on the one gas tank. At any rate, I think it's fair to say we've gotten our money's worth out of that vehicle. We currently have 7 full-time facility staff sharing 3 vehicles, including this old jalopy. So there's not enough vehicles for staff in a normal year, and with COVID operations right now, DPW facilities and everywhere else, it's 1 staff per vehicle to limit close contact. So our request is for a Dodge pickup 2500, as you said, with toolbox body, liftgate, plow package, and it's going to be virtually a mirror image of the one you see in the lower left, which is the other facilities vehicle. And Nick, please chime in if you want to add anything on detail, or if you guys have any questions on usage. Nick is our assistant facilities director, soon to be facilities director upon Mark Kelly's retirement. So if you haven't met Nick before, Nick's been with us for how many years now? 3.
Actually, it was 3 years in January. So
time flies when you're having fun. So,
oh, yeah.
So he's kind of brought us into the digital age as far as work orders and you know, getting our asset management system up and running. So any facilities questions, Nick's the man. And any questions on the vehicle?
is there any value at all to the old vehicle?
So the scrap metal and the tires, maybe, you know, I haven't looked at the treads, but I think we put new tires on it. So you got tires, and maybe that yellow light at the top, the orange light, might be cool to throw on something.
Yeah, okay. And you're going to put a plow package on this one so you can plow with it, right?
Right. So the facilities staff are tasked with primarily driveways and schools, and we'll get into the Bobcat a little bit later. So there's 2 other requests we're talking about tonight, which are shared facilities / DPW operations. One of them is a Bobcat and one of them is a bucket truck, and they both help with plowing as well, or the Bobcat will. So until we go to the next request, do you want to, any other questions on the
Yeah,
Brian, I just had a couple of quick questions. Refresh my memory. I'm pretty sure we've had a discussion about a facilities truck replacement, sometime in the past 2 years. If I recall correctly, there was similar end of life discussion. The engine, would start and then we couldn't get it restarted or something like that.
That's right.
Is this that truck, and was that request just simply deferred, or is this
No,
different?
so this is a different truck. That truck was it was a green, I'll have to go back to the records, but I think it was I think it was also a Dodge 2500. And the problem was with I think it was something in the fuel pump and injection that wasn't, it was a much newer vehicle. It wasn't a 97. It was like a 2004 or 5 vintage, if I remember correctly. But
I guess what I'm struggling with is when I read the CAPA request sheet, it said facilities, I think, has a 2017 and a 2018. It didn't look like there was anything else that had been added to facilities in the past couple of years, but I distinctly remember the request. Did we just not replace it?
yeah, no, so the 2018 was the newest one. And
Yep.
we did have this on the capital sheet last year, but it was pushed off. So
Okay, so there was a request.
Yeah,
So I'm not insane. There was a request, there was a discussion. We actually did not go through with the replacement.
Yeah, so this request we're talking about right now has been regurgitated for 2 cycles. So you
Okay.
probably heard it maybe 2 years ago. Last year it was a preliminary discussion, and then we scrapped it. I forget for what purpose. I think during the
Okay, so we have heard the request before. We did not replace the truck for I don't know why. I think everything got pushed off with COVID, and now it's just back again. Okay. And then the second question I had is, I understand that one of the police Tahoes has come over to facilities. How is that? And I'm not suggesting that should suffice for this replacement, but how is that working out? And is that a viable strategy for additional around town vehicles?
So that is being used by emergency management and facilities. Nick, you can chime in. Facilities has not used the vehicle, and it's not outfitted like this, has a lift package, toolbox.
A clearly different animal, but
Yeah.
but nonetheless useful, at least for getting people around town. I read in your request that right now people are using their own personal vehicles, and
That's
certainly
correct.
an old police Tahoe has cargo capacity and can move people as well.
Right, and it's there for that. Nick, I don't know if you want to chime in. So that vehicle was just transitioned over, and anecdotally, it may have been the facilities, but it's really emergency management. It says emergency management on the side. They've been using it for COVID-related things, since it moved over.
Yeah, I'd piggyback on that. It's especially with the current climate, emergency management has been using a preliminary, and yeah, it's a good people mover, but it it usually works out that we're in need of putting things in the bed of a truck that you wouldn't want to be putting on an interior of a vehicle.
Right.
So yeah, I know what you're saying though. Like it is a viable vehicle for, if you just need to bop around town a little bit, but
Yeah, and so where you get at, Brian, I think so. As far as one person, one vehicle, we have been leveraging. So that one is literally, I think, 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the inventory, and we've been leveraging the other electric vehicles too between DPW facilities.
So emergency management is using this right now. Is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it.
Hopefully, vaccinations of staff will be hopefully within the next 6 weeks, and then the second shot is 28 days later. So hopefully that'll alleviate some
the only reason I raised it is that there are 2 more police SUVs being purchased this year, which means there are probably 2 more decent SUVs rolling out of their fleet, and they're obviously not good for pursuit, but they're good for around town. So think about if there's a use for them. Otherwise, we'll just sell them.
So Brian, we actually, under our Green Communities programming, we are not allowed to take vehicles out of service and repurpose them to another department. When they're taken out of service, we're supposed to repurpose them with a more energy efficient vehicle.
Okay.
We were given a waiver this year to do it because of all the circumstances, but I don't know if that's something that we can practice moving forward,
Okay.
but something to look into.
Brian, just a quick question. Your original request was for 57,200. Now it's up to 59. Is that additional stuff added on to it, or?
So we typically put radios. So it's not in the quote. The radio is we have a radio.
So you're covering everything that's going to go into the vehicle then?
Right. Plow package, full.
Okay.
Everything through the end. We don't want to come back and say, we need $2,000 for a radio or
Well,
50.
We'd rather not have you come back for $1,000, but
Never asked twice.
okay, understand. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I do. It's Mike.
Yes.
This is for my own education. The question really comes to lease versus purchase. Are these vehicles really we can only purchase them because of the work that they do and the customizing that we do? Do we ever or have the opportunity to lease for 3-year period and turn them in?
We haven't looked at that, Mike. The only lease vehicle, and I know Susan was integral in this, was the heavy haul tractor that we leased, and but other than that, we haven't investigated lease. All the trucks we've been buying, around $50,000 and such, they're all on the state contract, pre-vetted through, I think is it Plymouth County, Michelle, that we're buying this from? So we haven't investigated lease, and using the state contract saves a lot of time and effort on, going out to bid on your own.
I see. Okay, thanks.
So Mike, normally with the lease, you would want to have a situation where you're looking to refresh vehicles often. And usually you're going to have mileage limitations, but considering these vehicles are being used for 15 to 20 years, I don't see much of an advantage to leasing if that's going to continue.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, this is Ralph. Just a couple of things. When we do get requests, for example, from the police department, what we get usually is an itemization of all of the specific pieces that they're adding on to the base price of the vehicle. It would be very helpful to have that here so we understand what all of the additional things you're buying. That helps a lot. In our
so that is on the OneDrive. I can, when I'm off the presentation, I'll email that to the same group, but it's
Okay.
It's on there as a PDF. It's got the full quote with all the lines and itemization, the liftgate package and the plow package, I believe.
Okay, that's good. And then the second one is that repeatedly we see, and certainly the DPW vehicles, and we see it also in some of the others, that, including the fire engines, we're getting an awful lot of rusted equipment out here. Is there anything we can do to make sure that the vehicles we actually acquire are somewhat better, either galvanized or in any other way made more durable than what we see now? Because we are continually seeing one thing after the other, whether it's a front end loader, a fire engine, or a truck, we're seeing they're rotting out. And it just seems to me that it would be desirable, even though this is not a particularly young truck, and I understand that, but it would be desirable if we understood how, in fact, are we going to keep these vehicles from rusting out to the degree they are.
Yeah, I see a lot of the corrosion we've been looking at. So DPW in particular, if you go in the garage, they're meticulous. Carl and his crew are meticulous at washing the trucks and undercarriage. And you look at the 1986 10-wheeler that's in there, looks as good as the 2000 vintages. Facilities, we've been searching for a home. Right now, their workshop is underneath a classroom in the Deer Hill School in a garage at the rear. You know, and the vehicles are parked back there. So that any maintenance or anything that's required is down to DPW, but there's really no, you know, place you can hose the vehicle down or anything like that, unless they make a special trip over to DPW. We are we're actively looking for spots to maybe have because the school buses are no longer located at DPW for constraints of, you know, area. We're looking for maybe a joint place we could put school buses, facilities, and have the things you're talking about, like a wash bay or things that might help out. As far as changing, I don't know that we could change any of the actual components from these standard vehicle maintenance, you know, to make it like a stainless steel or something like that. It may be a pretty big price, but it's something we're looking at. And a lot of the other rot that you guys have replaced a few things for DPW in the past years. It's been on the salt spreaders and the rear bodies of the salt spreaders. And it's generally from, you know, the salt being on that body for the whole winter. And then, you know, we end up patching them with signs and things like that after, you know, several years of rot. But I think right now the fleet's in pretty good shape, with the exception of this one. But it is something we need to look at, being a coastal town, dealing with salt.
Yeah, the only thing, I did mention it when the fire department was with us a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, and that is that when we were in the DPW garage, this is the one in Hull, their maintenance guy said they had a neutralizing agent they used on their trucks. And I know the chief is going to look into this, but it is worthwhile to ask yourself, what can we do to neutralize the salt on these vehicles so that although water is great, you're not neutralizing it, and still some residue always remains, and it's always quite corrosive. So some additional thought about how do we reduce the corrosion, whether it's garaging or washing with a neutralizing solution or water, whatever. It seems to me we ought to be asking ourselves that question, given the number of cases we continually see. That's the only point I'm going to make. Just asking to take a look at what we could do. That's
We'll look at it. So the neutralizing agent, was that a wash or an actual component that was?
It was a wash. And what had happened is when we were looking at the snowplow or the whatever the vehicle was we were looking at, I walked back and there was the maintenance guy was in the back of the garage there, and he was very proud of his ability to actually keep all of that equipment largely rust free. And he was using some kind of neutralizing agent in addition to water. So I think the chief is going to look into that, but it is worthwhile asking, what is it they're doing that we're not doing that seems to be effective? So that's the only question. So.
Okay, yeah, sure. We'll take a look at that. You know, another thing that comes to mind is, you know, cathodic protection. So, you know, a lot of times you protect metal with like a sacrificial anode, like a zinc or something like that. You know,
right.
Similar to what you put on an outdrive.
In your boat, sure.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, I get the notes. We'll look at that. Any other questions on the pickups or other?
Anybody have any questions on the pickup? Okay, let's move on then. What do you want to take next? The mowers?
We'll go for the mowers. And so Brian, I read your email. I sent an email with the attachment. So the mowers, all the quotes for the mowers are on one PDF. So, you know, the slope mower is is in that PDF. So the mowers, we have we're looking to replace two stand-up mowers. One of them is 15 years old. The other one's 20 years old. These are kind of the, you know, the workhorses, the mules of our mowing operation. We have, you know, 2.2 million square feet, open area, 52 acres. The largest number of sites, not the largest area, but the largest number are those kind of like small triangular, small parks, things that a larger unit won't go on. The guys drive around, hit it with a stand-up mower, and then move on to the next site. So that's, you know, you've seen these around town. That they are what they are. It's the two stand-ups, and the capital request is for two at a total price of two for $17,500.
So this is for two mowers.
This is for two stand-ups, and you know, we're not bid splitting, you know, or it's, you know, each individually are under the 10, but we're looking to replace them, and we figured, you know, you guys as capital and budget should review it. The other one is the slope mower. This is a new unit to DPW after a lot of trial and error and some bigger errors. So it's a Harper 72-inch slope mower. The capital request is for 48.4. So for the slopes around town that are over 15 to 20% grade, such as the front of the middle high school, the rear of the high school football practice field, along Milliken Field, the landfill, and other areas that need to get mowed, like Aaron River Dam. It's an earthen dam. We've in the past mowed these with ride-on or the stand-up mowers unsafely. You know, they've successfully, but unsafely. We have seized and damaged, had to replace a couple of mowers. So what happens when you're over the 15 to 20% grade, the oil that's in the oil pan to lubricate the engine isn't getting lubricated, and it can seize up if you're riding for a long time at an angle. It has happened. Carl's got two anchors in the garage in the back to prove it. So the slope mower will go up to angles of 30 degrees, which are pretty severe, and it keeps the rider and the engine and everything at a horizontal angle while the mower does its whatever angle it needs. Big part is obviously safety. They have been doing it unsafely with ride-ons, and the areas we're talking about are too big to hit with weed whackers. Be there for a month of Sundays to do it. So that's what this request will fulfill. It's also used it'll obviously do flat surface areas, so it would be used for that as well. But it would take out the safety issue and the issue of potential equipment damage.
So this can also be used on a level surface,
Correct.
correct? And then is that a picture of one of our mowers in the ditch?
Both of these are a stock picture online of the units that we're looking to purchase. So the right standard commercial mower is the yellow one up top, and then the Harper 72 slope mower is the one that's on the slope. The only difference is we're getting a shade canopy on the top, in addition to what you're looking at here.
Oh, I was looking at the one in the water.
Oh, the one in the water. No, yeah, sorry, you guys are covering that for me. But yeah, I threw that in there as an example of,
Of what might
could
happen.
Yeah.
We
That would only be at the
done
Aaron
that
Dam, I
yet.
guess.
Any questions?
Just a few. Brian, I see this is a Harper 72. The request said it was a John Deere. Have we switched our view of what the right solution is?
So I'm having trouble. I can't toggle back and forth the request, but the Harper 72 was the one we got the quote for. Michelle, do you have the request there? So in doing the vetting, they went through several different mowers and got different prices from different vendors.
Okay.
And the John Deere may have been on the request initially. And again, this one has been discussed in the past. I don't know if it went through a formal vetting process by Capital, but a lot of times, like the salt shed, we're probably going off the fifth or sixth iteration of the request on that one. So information might be a little antiquated in some areas of it.
Any questions?
For me, Sam, it's Ralph. A quick question. Is it possible that we could just contract out the slopes, Brian, rather than buying another very expensive piece of equipment? Why don't we just contract out this high slope areas, or else actually, is there an attachment on our very fancy new
So-
snow sidewalk machine that could be used for this purpose. Because one of the reasons we even chose that machine, I believe, was that it was very good at going down slopes.
So there is an attachment for the sidewalk machine that does vegetation. But if you look at the frequency in May, June, and maybe even to July, depending on the weather, the guys are mowing sometimes up to 2 times a week. The front, we could get away with it obviously on the dam and maybe some other areas, but if you look at Milliken, Bancroft, the schools, it would be, if we contracted it out and awaited a contractor, we'd probably have to contract the entire field, or it wouldn't be in with the frequency that we have, but it is an option we have not looked at. Same with, all the areas that are sloped, but they're contiguous with flatter areas that we're doing on a regular mowing basis.
It just seems to me that this is a lot of money, and you should really be thinking about, are there some options with either existing equipment and or from potentially having others do it? So, because there is sort of the cost benefit ratios on these things are really bother me. So anyway, that's all there's nothing more I can say about it. So.
Yeah, I mean, the contracted, we look at it in all different types of operation. We'll get into in some of the equipment, talk about it this after us. The contract operation looks great on paper, cost effective, but it's the timing of the operation and, when you need it, and the frequency. And, mowing is something, I mean, there are landscapers in town, but, we can look at that for sure.
Okay, appreciate it.
Sure.
So Brian, I know we
Yes.
funded a mower last year. So how many mowers do we have as a town?
I have it on the rolling stock, but as I'm sharing the screen, can I email you the group, that number?
Sure. Yeah, and if you would, just a little detail about them, whether they're stand up, sit down.
Yeah, so I mean, I can talk about it. So we have stand-ups, we have several tractors with, with towable attachments. We have the one that has the wings on it, purchased last year. You get into things that, as Ralph was talking about, the sidewalk machine that has the, articulating arm. It wouldn't reach down a slope, but it does. It's not really a mower, it's more of a thrasher. But it does do the side vegetation and clear vegetation on sides of roads. So you can get that information.
So Brian, the trackless came with a, I forget what it was. It was a very wide flail mower that was not on the arm as well. And I know there was some discussion about possibly using that for the dams. I assume we still have that piece of equipment. That's still a viable use.
We do, and we have used it. We used it at the duck pond last year to take down the big vegetation that was over there.
Right. But it's not a grass mower, which is
Yeah.
really what you're talking about here in front of the schools and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's the whole issue behind this request is keeping the operator and the machine in a horizontal plane. And I wouldn't want to put, the sidewalk machine or anything else that drives at a, at an angle.
Brian, I did find those quotes that were posted to the OneDrive, and it's because they're all in one thing. It does start off with John Deere as the company selling the Harper mower, and then ABC, is that where you're getting it from, ABC Mechanical or something? If you go down the list a little further, it has the Wright Stander commercial mowers.
Thanks, Michelle.
Any questions?
I have a couple questions. Are the two stand-up mowers, is that price, is there any discount in that if we're buying two at the same time?
Yes, are you still looking at that same spreadsheet, Michelle, or the same quote? I think the bottom subtotal line has a discount in there.
Oh, is it? Sorry, I missed that then. I was just looking at the top.
It-
Okay. All right, I'll go back and look at that. And if you were to prioritize getting this stand-up mower versus the slope, what would you say is more urgent need?
It's a good question, but it's a little bit independent. I mean, the stand-up mowers, you know, the guys are great at keeping things going. And if something breaks, like the stand-up mowers where the engine sees, they just buy an engine and swap it out, but they're getting old. So there are workhorses, but the slope mower, beyond just the mowing, it's a safety thing, which now all municipalities are under OSHA. And there's a lot more stringent, I guess, policy upon us to do things safely. And this comes in, we'll be talking about the bucket truck in a few minutes. So they can come in and the value of this goes beyond just the mowing of the surface. I think it saves the town from liability and fines and, you know, God forbid, an injury or worse.
Brian, we're going to ask you to prioritize all your requests, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so you should be thinking about that long term.
So that means I come with 12 requests next year?
Well,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
what's more important, the bucket truck or the slope mower?
I understand.
Or the salt
Yeah,
shed?
you guys have a very tough job. You have $5 and $10 worth of purchases. So I understand where you're coming from, but a lot of these, it's hard to interrelate, you know, priorities when they do different operations and they're I'll prioritize as best I can, but it's sometimes the interrelation it doesn't.
I understand, but you got to do the best you can. We don't have enough money to fill everybody's request. Okay, so some we're going to have to say no to at this point. So if you prioritize it, it really helps us.
We will do that.
All right, Sam?
Yes,
Sam,
Mike?
it's Mike. I was going to wait until we were through with this whole presentation, but I just want to comment on your comment. We're faced with the same problem for police and fire and ultimately schools. You know, each of these three major departments all have real needs, and we're being asked to prioritize them based on what we hear from these proponents. So I just want to put an idea out there and not for discussion now, maybe later on in this meeting we can take it up, but I just want to sort of put it on the table, and that is, you know, perhaps we ought to have a meeting of the minds with the chiefs of police and fire and the head of DPW, all in the same room, all at the same table, all with their same requests on a sheet in front of them. And we come to a meeting of the minds. Maybe it's called horse trading, or maybe it's like a draft where you choose number one in your draft, so that the decision is partially ours, but really, I think it's up to the departments to also chip in and help us figure out how to balance these different needs. So I just want to leave that idea out there, and perhaps we can talk about it, you know, later in this meeting or set up a special.
Well, last year, Michael, just to bring you up to speed, last year we went through a town-wide prioritizing exercise, taking each request and ranking it on a grid, and then totaling it up at the end to try to figure out how you balance, say, the schools against the fire department and so forth. It's kind of a Rube Goldberg, but it's better than nothing. And we'll try to do the same thing again this year once we've gone through everything.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Brian, what's next?
Next, we have, and just on Mike's point, I think it's a good idea. You know, if we have some big ticket items, if one of us can defer for a year, and then you kind of spread out the big tickets over several years instead of hitting all at once. It makes sense. So the next one is the bucket truck. This is an F-450 bucket truck, a capital request for $95,000. To date, this fiscal year, we've spent $56,000 in hazardous tree maintenance with an annual budget of only $40,000.
Is that 56 renting a bucket truck?
So 75% of that cost is bucket truck work, contracted bucket truck work.
But that includes the crew, right, Brian?
Yeah, that's right. That's everything. Yeah. So 75% of that is bucket truck operations at elevation. So we have, and right now we're not taking down any trees that are not hazardous. You know, we do normal trimming and pruning in the beginning of the fiscal year, but this year there was a significant amount of hazardous tree removal, which brought us to an overspent by January. Facilities rents lifts for a lot of different operations. They maintain the lights at all the schools, the traffic lights that are in the parking lots, roof inspections, gutters, you know, anything at an elevation. The salt shed rental, Nick and staff and I were up there. You see a picture up in the upper right, that same rental we use to do, the cameras need to be rewired at the RTF, the restrung from building to building. There's always a need for a lift around town, and it's usually either done unsafely with a ladder or it's done through a rental, and we try to cram all the projects into the same time frame. Again, we're under OSHA guidelines. I have been trying to get staff to do some, you know, I myself have done a lot of tree trimming in a past life, and I worked at a ladder and ropes and all that stuff. But with OSHA jurisdiction, it's really not bucket truck operations are really the only way to do a, you know, elevated tree pruning and large branch removal. So we have no means currently to cut branches that are over 14 feet height, and that's with the pole saw. And we do that go around town, but it doesn't, you look at the canopy on all of our streets, there's a lot of bigger branches above that elevation. Like all our contracts, we use low bid, and we try to use collectively bid contracts. The current tree contractor is from Rhode Island. So when we have something, unless we know it's going to be an issue and try to pre-deploy him or them and pay for them to pre-deploy, you know, you have a bit of a response, and we've had street closures for a long time to get, you know, widow makers, those big limbs that hang over the roadway cleared. This truck would take care of that. So again, this is a facilities and DPW request. If Nick is still on, he could probably talk about a lot of the things they do at elevation, but it's, you know, they're constantly up on roofs and doing things at elevation.
Yeah, we use lifts all throughout the year, winter, summer, you name it. And like Brian said, you know, we've kind of been relegated to save on costs because they're not cheap to rent. We try to, you know, if it's not an emergency, we'll stack as many jobs as we can. So when we do rent it, we can get a lot done in 3 days. So we don't have to keep renting new ones all the time, but things arise, and it adds up quick for a lift rental. Even though we get some pretty good pricing, it's doing it every single year it adds up.
What's the total in contractor and rental costs per year, approximately?
So conservatively, the 40,000 budget, which is always, usually it's overspent and we end up bottom lining. That's been increased year over year, and it will probably be
Yeah.
increased again. But so if you say 75% of that, you're looking at 30,000. And then, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 rentals a year, Nick? Maybe.
How much a rental?
Depending on the size of the lift we need, it's anywhere from $800 to $1,500 a day. So.
And how many days do you typically have them total, Nick, in a year? The lifts?
Kind of, so let's just say we got one 5 times in a year. Usually we can get away with doing all the work in one day, maybe take 2 of those and push them that we keep it for 2 or even 3 days. So
Okay.
Yeah, maybe like 10 working days, roughly, give or take.
Okay.
So you might spend a total of about 45,000 on hiring contractor and or renting equipment for the year.
That's fair at the existing budget price, but again, I think that may, well, who knows with the operating budget, but that should go up based on the amount of expense we incur in that budget line.
And this would allow you to do it with your existing staff, right?
Correct. So we have a town arborist who needs to stay on the ground because he has nothing but a ladder, and we have a tree and park crew who could all work, and facility staff who could all work at elevation. And Nick, I've been up on a lift with Nick many times. He's an expert operator of these.
Do we need any special training for this?
Nick, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, any training that would be done, it still falls under having a hoisting license. Not that that gives you realistic training, but if we were to purchase a truck, I imagine they would do a general overview of all the operations of it. And once you use one machine, they're all kind of the same. So once you know the controls, you'll know how to operate it.
Yeah, so on that, all of our DPW staff and any new jobs we post require hoisting licenses. All our staff have hoisting licenses, and any unit we purchase will be, training is inclusive of the price.
So can I ask a question? Did you say, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Francine, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understood this, the truck you're proposing, then would that meet all your needs, or are there certain jobs that you would still need to contract out? So it's not a perfect solution.
So we'd still need tree maintenance where we need to do a full tree removal, say with the crane, where you have a crane and lifting a tree off of an area. But this would take care of any tree maintenance up to 35 feet, prunings and things like that. The other thing we can't go near is power lines. There's a 10-foot radius around the power line that we can't enter by DPU law.
So are the utilities, this is where I don't know, are the utilities responsible for that typically, to clear around the lines themselves?
Yeah, they are responsible for it, but you'll notice if you go down a street where they aren't directed on what they're doing, they'll just cut a hole right through the canopy going straight down, and leaves the rest of the tree, either to die or just get misshapen, and that's where, town maintenance comes in.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Susan?
Yeah, so Brian, if we were to acquire this, where would we store it?
It would be at DPW.
And it would be outdoors, or would it fit indoors, or no?
No, it would fit indoor. Retracted, it's an F450, so it's the size of the 450s up there. It would fit indoor. I guess we could park it inside. It's just a matter of what we put outside.
Sam, I guess my question is really the same for you, Brian, which is to make sure that we don't buy this and then find that we're worrying about rusting out on this one or deteriorating aspects of the truck. It just feels as though we're buying a lot of equipment and we may not have garage space. It really feels as though we've got an awful lot of equipment which may in fact not be garaged anymore, yet it's extremely expensive. I'm not opposed to having a lift truck. We used to have one, as you probably know, but it rotted out also. That was, in fact, it may still sit up there at the DPW. I'm not sure if it's in the back lot there. There was one. The other thing is, I would guess if you were limited to within 10 feet of a power line, it would make it difficult to maintain, for example, the LED lights, because you certainly would be within 10 feet of a power line. So this is going to be limited to probably tree work and some other more maintenance kinds of work, but not necessarily working around electrical fixtures on the poles. So.
Yeah, so it's a good point, Ralph. The LED lights, so the street lights I mentioned earlier are just the ones that are after the meter in the parking lots of the schools, and there's several of them. It's not the street lights that are in the street, which are maintained by our electrical street light vendor, Daigle, and their contract is without any extra work is around 13,000 and change a year. And then, you know, it's additive depending on how much work you do, replacements are pulled down, things like that. It's not that. The facilities guys change bulbs and they do all the maintenance on the lights without having to interfere with any kind of, you know, conductors or grid infrastructure. It's all after the meter at the school.
Also, you know, my observation of guys who do this for a living is that usually there's one really seriously professional guy who does all of the tree trimming, and all the rest of the guys are pretty much gatherers of tree limbs. And usually there's a highly professional guy who's really good at it, you know, gently lowers the limbs to the ground. I mean, I've watched them do really terrific work. I hope we have someone of that capability. You just don't want to cut limbs and just let them fall, free fall anywhere. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to say we do have some really good talent in town. Okay. And even, you know, we've hired some new talent on the facility side and that they're skilled. So, and you know, a big thing and a big push with OSHA and our Meyer insurance rates are training, and we've been stepping up safety training, you know, toolbox talks on a periodic basis. And if we get this unit, it'll be no different. It'll be safety operations, and including how to lower a limb, how to cut it, you know, anything from traffic cones all the way to getting the stuff chipped on the side of the street.
Okay, thanks.
Brian, a few more questions.
Sorry.
Sorry, it sounded like someone was about to speak. A few more questions. I just poked around on bucket trucks briefly before this meeting, and two questions regarding functionality. The first is, assuming that, you know, it's basically the truck that's pictured here, does that have the capacity to actually lift any type of heavy materials either onto a roof, or as Ralph suggested, you know, to tie off a major limb and lower it to the ground, or does that require a heavier duty unit than what's pictured here?
So again, I've done a lot of tree operations myself and seen a lot of tree operations. Generally, the hoisting, the lowering of the limbs to the ground are usually through with a rope off of an existing limb that's on the tree. So you're not leveraging the unit itself. And maybe Nick can talk to the weight of these units, but I think it would hold two people. So I think it's probably anywhere from like 500 to 700 pounds. I don't know, Nick, do you know?
Yeah, I mean,
you can get the spec sheet off of.
I mean, I was really thinking about lifting like a replacement, you know, AC unit or something like that onto a school roof. Maybe not the big ones, but certainly the little ones. I'm just thinking out loud. Is that something we would do here, or is that a different unit?
I mean, an AC unit, if you think of all the RTUs, I think those would probably be lifted with a crane, unless it was the size of, one of those mini splits. You could put a mini split on this.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
So this is really just a bucket for people when it comes right down to it.
correct.
Okay.
Work at elevation safely.
Okay. And that's why there are no outriggers or anything on this for stabilization. Is that fair?
Right. And this has been talked about in the past, and it was a unit without riggers and things like that. And it's, once you start getting into that crane type equipment, your price goes way up. It's, you're talking, around the 200,000 range to more than that. But for our purposes, which is safe work at operation, getting rid of the safety hazards around town, roof work, inspections, the salt shed roof that
Right.
Nick and his guys demoed, this would all work for that purpose.
Okay. I mean, just thinking out loud here, Nick, if your team alone is renting one of these, 7+ days a year, which is, I think was your number, and it's roughly $1,000 a day, it's going to take 15 years to pay for this or 15 years for payback just on facilities use. And then the DPW use is basically free, right?
So the intention is primarily this was DPW. Facilities is an added benefit.
Well, I mean, just the savings on facilities alone will pay for this over the life of the vehicle, is my point.
That was our thought.
Okay. Can we get more than 15 years out of this? I mean, this is only going to be used, 15, 20 days of the year when it comes right down to it, right?
If we get this unit,
we get 25 out of the fire trucks.
Yeah, I would say yes, based on our current, what we've been getting out of our vehicles. And if we got this unit as a specialized piece of equipment, you look at all the, the joints that are on it, I think storage inside would probably be what we would do. And I would even recommend maybe a vote if you guys choose to vote in favor of this, saying that, with the caveat that DPW will store this inside, or I fully support that.
Any other questions?
The only question, I guess, Brian, would be, it's fairly limited. It's got a 34-foot maximum height, which is not really terribly high for the kinds of things you might want to do. Is there much in the way of tree work that actually requires going up higher that you would recommend and that you will still have to pay for?
So if you're at an elevation of 35 feet, the limbs you're cut, it could reach upwards of 50 of those. So I can think of just in the last month, we've talked with the church on the common, and they put a lot of capital investment into their siding, their roof, and things, and the branches are encroaching on that church. They requested of us to do trimming to bring back the branches. We can't do it. We have to contract that out. We've already gone over the budget, and our in-house policy over the budget is we only take care of hazardous maintenance. So things like that we could take, really any of the trees that have limbs that need to be pruned. If you're at an elevation of 35 feet, you can get almost to the top of most of the big trees in town as far as the canopy.
Okay.
If you're following it in the right way.
Is 35 feet what you guys have historically rented or contracted?
They get longer, some of them are articulating and they go up to 60 feet. I mean, but I don't think we would, like I said, once you get into the bigger heights and you get to the bigger outriggers, you're talking about big prices. And I think 90% of the work that we need to do for limbing, 35 feet will get us. And Nick, I don't know, maybe you can talk about the roof heights that you go to, but Town Hall's probably the biggest one. And,
yeah, and it's kind of depended. And like you said, I think we had to get like an 80 once to really get up high. And that one, it wasn't that we had to go 80 feet vertical, but the 80-foot boom lift had a better reach and we couldn't get close to the building. So there's kind of all sorts of things that go into it, but the minimal amount of times that we have to get really high, it makes sense to run something like that. And I mean, to get something that can get 60 feet, like Brian said, that cost is like exponentially higher. Those pieces of machinery are a totally different animal.
But you're comfortable this 35 footer will address the overwhelming majority of your needs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions? Let's move on, Brian.
All right, moving on, the DPW wood chipper.
You do not have one of these now, do you?
We do have an older unit. You can see it on the right-hand side. We use for brush days, and we've, when it's down, we've rented units either for brush days or for storm cleanup. And it has been down. So this would be, in addition to that, as the front line, we would still keep the older unit, but it would be basically the, you know, for storm cleanups, we'd take both of them around town. It's used every month, and it's used, it's one of those things when you need it, you really need it, and everybody else is looking for the same unit. Capital request is $38,600. It's a 200 XL. It's got a 12-inch diameter capability, and that's a picture of that unit in the middle.
How old is the existing unit?
Stand by. Let's see if I can.
Brian, did you get that? How old the existing?
I did. So while I'm trying to answer that, or I have my, I'm texting the answer right now. Are there any other questions?
I've got another question. The form that I'm looking at shows it's replaced the frontline wood chipper. It looks like a year 2000. I don't know if that's correct, but that's what the Excel file shows online. My question is that file also shows a cost of $24,250. But the presentation here shows $38,000. What's changed? Did you get a quote to solidify that number, or?
Do you have the quote, Michelle? So the existing unit is a 2004, to answer the previous question.
Okay.
So Brian, is the quote in with all those other quotes?
But stop.
Let's see.
Sorry, that was my son.
So the quote came in at,
So I created this off of the quotes in the spreadsheet. So if
Yeah.
it's not what the value was on the quote, I probably mistyped it, but
yeah, so the quote from the company is $38,577.03.
okay, thank you.
So the 24,000 is not correct.
Correct, not correct.
And
Michelle, is
Brian,
that state bid list or is that just a random commercial bid?
So it's state.
Okay.
Brian, what would you tow this around with?
It could be towed by any of the 550s, the tree and park trucks.
Okay.
Even the
often-
250 with the tow package, I think could handle it.
How often does the existing chipper fail to work or go down?
I can tell you anecdotally, I remember twice in the last year, but I'll need to get a hard number on that. And, you know, a lot of things
Have
that
one
break.
chipper,
like on these,
correct?
Our guys find the components and fix it in-house. Again, they usually break when you're using it and when you need it.
I mean, I'm just questioning the need for another chipper. Because that'll give you two. And it doesn't seem like we need two chippers.
Or can we sell off the old one?
I would, if that was the consensus, I would check with, I need to confer with the staff, but I'd rather sell the old one and have a new one that has warranty and less prone to failure.
Well, if you get rid of the old one, how much can you get for it?
Mhm.
I'm just writing your questions, Sam. I won't be able to answer that now, but I will get it to you.
Okay,
So we
I
can,
understand.
so Brian, we can look on the surplus site in the morning and see what they're going for, surplus versus a trade-in with the company.
Yeah, I would, and again, this is just a guess. I would venture a guess that you might get 4,000 or 5,000. And again, let us do the vetting on that. But you know, think of a 2004 vehicle and what you paid for it and what the percentage value would be today after some heavy use.
Brian, just a couple of thoughts about chippers in general. I often go to brush day whenever I can, and I think the limitation that they place on us is that we can bring something up to 8 inches, I believe, in diameter. I'm not sure. I think it's 8. Once you get beyond 8 and you get up into this 12-inch size, which is what this one is, I don't see too many professional tree companies chipping at 12 inches. They usually cut them into 8-foot length, that is limbs that are 12 inches in diameter. They cut them into 8-foot lengths, and then they come by with a clamshell picker, and they pick them up and they put them in the truck. They generally are not, they're not using 12 inches, just too bloody big. I really wonder whether we really ought to be still staying with something in the order of 8 inches, which is much more manageable. And if you have to replace the current one, you know, get an 8-incher, don't get a 12-incher, which I think is very, very difficult for anyone to handle. That's a 12-inch diameter piece of wood at 8 feet long is a handful. I can tell you, it probably weighs 400 pounds. I mean, this is not simple stuff at all. So anyway, that's my observation, having a lot of brush work done at our house actually. So anyway, yeah.
So I'm getting a confirmation. So the existing one is a 12, and so I hear you saying typically you're not handling 12. It can handle 12. That's the max capacity, but generally, you know, the majority of brush you're cutting are 4 inches. You know, 4 inches or less. But it's the handling capacity of the existing one is a 12.
It is 12. Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions on the chipper?
Nope.
Michael? Okay,
You know, it's not a question, Sam, just an observation. If my guess is that when we were outsourcing our bucket truck for limb work, we were probably outsourcing the chipper part of it as well. Is that reasonable, Brian?
No, when we need the chipper, we rent a chipper, and we've rented it for brush days.
Okay, but I'm just saying when we had outside crews coming in with bucket trucks to do limb work,
they had
they
their
bring
own
their own chipper.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to be now that we're doing our own limb work with our own bucket truck, we're going to have a lot higher demand for a chipper.
That's correct.
Okay.
Brian, it's Mike. Is there any reason why we limit brush days to 1 day a month was that based on the age of the existing chipper? Would we ever want to go to twice a month during those peak times when people have lots of brush to bring in?
Yeah, we've had those conversations, especially after the recent storms. There were, I think it may have been 3 weeks between brush days at one point, but generally once a month is what we handle as far as staff and RTF. You know, it's all overtime staff, basically. The RTF is still running, and it's DPW, tree and park, or highway guys running the chippers and that operation. We could certainly do more. It's just it comes down to necessity and money on staff time.
Would you consider having a brush day during, well, at times when there's a lot of brush, and generally that's in the spring when people are like chopping down bushes, or after a storm, would we be able to have a brush day, say during the week when tree and park are on the clock, to just get rid of the town's brush as a result of heavy load, heavy demand?
Certainly, that is an option we could consider.
Thanks.
Any other questions on the chipper?
But just an observation, reflecting on what Mike said, I probably use the green connection in Situate 4 times as frequently as I can use the brush day in Cohasset. It really is not anywhere near frequent enough for the kinds of work I'm doing around our place. So it really would be desirable to have much more frequent use of the current or a chipper in Cohasset, rather than having to drive down to Situate and pay to actually get rid of brush, which is what I'm doing most of the time these days. So.
Yeah, so we can talk over the challenge with weekdays versus a weekend is, when everybody else is doing their mowing, trimming, and cutting, we're also doing, that 52 acres of space during the weekdays, the regular work days. And the weekends are staffed. If it's a brush day, it's an off work day that have no assignments, and we can, staff it fully. But in the event of a really heavy time of year or after a major storm, I think we could certainly entertain like a Wednesday or a Thursday. RTF would be closed, maybe something like that. It's usually our RTF hauling day, but there's a way I think we could do it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other chipper questions? Next, Brian?
Okay, this is the one, the skid steer.
Yeah,
So the monthly rental of the skid steer is $3,100. Pembroke has a unit that is being surplused. Our staff have checked it out. It's in good shape and feel it, there's 10+ years of expected life on the unit. This Bobcat is primarily used for snow removal in the village and in and around town in the tight quarters. We've had a contractor for many years, decades, doing the clearing, didn't renew this year. And, we've solicited many contractors for Bobcats and really for plows. We started the year off, but we were down 5 vehicles. So we're already short-staffed. We unfortunately lost a longtime plow driver this weekend. He died of COVID, unfortunately. So it's right now we're at the point where we need to rent the unit, and we were presented with this opportunity. Based on the rental cost, the rate of return's 4 months, and it's a good unit that could be used for a yard machine, moving materials, loading, You know, there's periodic nor'easters where we're down clearing off the causeway, you know, Rocky Beach, Wadley Park. There's a, I'm sure some of you have operated a Bobcat. It's a versatile machine that if we chose, we could get attachments for. And that's basically it on the Bobcat. So it's a short money and big use.
How much yearly in total are you spending on renting Bobcats or a Bobcat?
So this is the first year we are without the Bobcat for the village. So it would be the first year, but if you look at 4 months at 3,100 of winter, it would be the value of this purchase.
So this is the first year you've had to rent one.
We have not pulled the trigger on this yet. Yeah, we have not rented it.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah, this would be the first
you
year.
would have to.
Right.
So,
Have we rented a Bobcat for other things in town? I can't say, but I'm sure at some point we've had a Bobcat on site.
so Brian, I know the staff said it was in good condition, but how old is it? How many hours are on it? And of the things that do need to be repaired, was there comments about what they saw as more recent needs that this will require? Like the bucket looks pretty beat up, for example.
What was the last question there, Susan? Sorry.
Well, when they say it's in good condition, what do they expect to fail, say, in the near term after we acquire it?
I am soliciting that information.
We did a lot of work on Bobcats last year when we talked about snow removal. So there's certainly a lot of applications for a unit like this around town. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say their Bobcat sits idle. But I just don't want to buy something that we think we have a great price and find out there's real issues with the unit that we didn't know about.
So being familiar with Bobcats, you can see I'm still waiting on an answer here, but the things that fail on these are typically hoses. And if you open up the rear of the Bobcat, it's a pretty, it's like an old Jeep. It's kind of easy to work on. What you look at, what you see is what you get. And it's not as complex as, say the front end loader.
Well, how about the tires? Just looking at this picture, they look a little worn. Is that what we would anticipate for the age of this unit to have tires like that? Or, how much more time would we get on these tires before we'd have to replace them?
So the tires look good. Age of the unit is a 2000, and the estimate received from Boyd, Carl, and Dan, or 10, we'll get a good 10 plus years out of this unit. And knowing them, I'm sure they opened up the back of the, if you know the Bobcat, the back swings open to where the ballast is, and you can see everything from the one viewpoint pretty much. And they hold their value is what I'm getting from.
What do you do if you don't get this?
We rent, and then we rent again next year if we can't get a contractor.
What are you going to do to accomplish the different jobs that you planned on having this do?
So again, primarily it's the emergency use of it in the village. Bobcat is a zero turn unit. If you've driven it, it's a zero turn. You can grab a pile, you can go into tight quarters, you can move over an inch, things that you can't do with a front end loader, where you have to back up, back in, back up, try to get the same angle, turn, load it into a truck to haul it. The snow is is usually plowed and then stockpiled and then hauled from the village to the snow farm down at Sandy Beach. The one thing I didn't mention is this is also a facilities use for the schools and the sidewalk and plowing operations that are up there. We have a contractor front end loader has done the schools for years, and there's been, a front end loader is not as sensitive or as it does more damage, and there has been some damage, to curbing and things that you don't see until the snow melts in the spring.
Would this replace the need for the tracker to do those things?
The tracker. Oh, you mean the sidewalk machine?
Yeah.
No, so the
We
sidewalk
spent a lot of
machine-
analysis and time on that.
Yeah, we went through it. No, the width of this is not enough to drive down the sidewalks, but it is for, maneuvering from the street to clear, say, around the fountain downtown, pick up the snowbanks, put it in the 10-wheeler and, sensitively clean around those areas as far as trees, sidewalks, all the bricks. And the same thing at the schools. The sidewalks are much wider than what you have typically going down the roadways. So it wouldn't, to answer your question, sure, that was a long answer, but no, it wouldn't replace the sidewalk machine we got last year.
Sam, this is wider than the trackless. You really needed a special Bobcat with a narrow wheelbase to do the sidewalks.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that was an S. Yeah, it was a small unit.
Yeah. So Brian, it's a similar technical question, but in a different direction. In order to pick up a large bucket of snow and lift it high enough to dump into a 10-wheeler, some Bobcats can do it, others can't. What model is this specifically? And are we certain that this has, both the bucket? I mean, this is not a high capacity bucket that's in this picture. So we're probably going to be replacing the bucket with a high capacity bucket if you really want to do this job efficiently. And I guess my question is, is what unit is this? Which is a kind way of saying, is it big enough? Is it balanced enough? Is it squat enough to actually lift a large load of snow high enough to dump into a 10-wheeler? Because if it's the wrong unit, it's the wrong unit.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Brad. So in the past, we've had, I did say a 10-wheeler earlier, but in the past, we've had a roll-off downtown and use the heavy haul tractor. And,
Okay.
And so you have a container there. You get
So
all
it's a
the
big
snow.
lift. It's a high lift.
Not with the container, but can this go into the back of a 10-wheeler? I'm not sure offhand, but it's,
Well, whatever it is that you're planning to use. I mean, I
Yes.
don't want to dictate, what they take down there to load, but whatever it is that they're planning to load, can we please just make sure that this unit actually can lift a big enough scoop of snow high enough to get into that unit to be the right, well, to do the job.
Sure.
It was IREA who had this contract. Is that correct?
no, it was not. No, IREA is still working for us. It was,
Okay. I mean, I remember seeing the Bobcat downtown. It was not your standard small Bobcat loading. I mean, it was definitely one of the beefier Bobcats. And I just, without knowing what we're buying here, it's hard to say whether or not that actually has the capacity and the lift. So
so weight capacity it has, but the lift I'm checking into now. So the unit is the year 2000, but it's also a 2000 model 2000.
Okay, and is it a Bobcat or a John Deere?
It's a
Says John Deere.
Well, the picture is a John Deere.
Yeah, it's a John Deere 250.
It's a John Deere 250. Okay, and the bucket that's showing here is probably not what you'd use to lift large amounts of snow. So anyway, it's not going to get resolved right now, but we need to make sure that this thing can, grab a big scoop of snow and lift it up high without tipping over.
Yeah, so we'll, before the purchases, we can go down and, they're holding it first with right of first refusal. We can go
Sure.
down, especially after this storm, and grab a couple scoops and
Yeah, the
Drive out
specs
to
are all
the
online.
road.
It's not even a matter of grabbing scoops because they don't have the right bucket. I mean, you're going to need a bigger bucket if you really want to do this job well.
right. But as far as lift height, we could gauge it with that.
Height, yes. Yeah.
How long are they holding this for you?
They said we need an answer today, and I said we're talking about it tonight.
Excuse me?
They wanted an answer today, and I said we were talking about it tonight.
So you need some kind of a resolve on
Yeah,
this tonight.
Yeah, this is not a week or two deferment. It'll be gone. They're going to surplus it and go to the next buyer.
Where's the money coming from?
It's a previous, so it's an equipment account.
Well, what appropriation was it exactly?
So it's not, Michelle, do you know which one Dawn had approved it for?
No.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I'll see if I can get that in the meantime.
Yeah, Brian, not to be the dead horse on condition, but normally the most important thing you look at is how many hours are on the unit. And do we know that?
We don't have the hours.
That would be probably the most important thing to ask, because generally 2,000 to 25 to 2,500 hours is considered pretty much beating your skid steer to death.
So then, may I ask, so the two kind of major points, and I agree with the line of thought, is the hours and the capacity, as far as lifting capacity into the vehicle, that
Yeah,
whatever gets it
I
down
mean,
to the
it's
beach.
fundamentally lift weight at sufficient height.
Basically, we're talking about how useful will it be?
Yeah, I'm just quickly trying to pull up the specs here. So the vehicle weighs 6,250 pounds. It's a pretty high horsepower. This is a beefier Bobcat, I guess is what I would tell everybody in really practical terms. It's 70 inches wide. The sidewalk Bobcat was 42. The horsepower is 64. The sidewalk Bobcat was like 30. So this is a pretty beefy unit, but I'm just trying to find as long as it has the height capacity, we're probably just going to need a bigger bucket. But that still doesn't answer Susan's question about operating hours.
Okay, so to the question previously about it's from a supplies and equipment article from annual town meeting 2020. And so we don't know the hours, the lifting capacity, and Brian, you're right, that Bobcats of that vintage, I've operated several in the past. They have lifted boulders that are much heavier than snow, depending on the size of them. So as long as it's in good working order and the hours are of a decent vintage, then could I request a vote maybe or to approve on certain conditions you guys come up with, either whether it's hours and lifting or a test in Pembroke's yard? So Sam, did you get that article? Was it you that asked about where the money was coming from?
The what article?
It was annual town meeting 2020 supplies and equipment article.
Okay. And you didn't use all the money.
Apparently not.
Any other questions? Let's move on to the salt shed.
Okay, here we go. So salt shed, the capital request is for 530,000. I know the request that was submitted was 500. So in the last week, I've received updated quotes on these two types of buildings. Our existing structure, as I think you saw through the emails, the roof had ripped off on a sunny but windy day. We rented a lift and went up there, and I was up there with Nick, and we could pull off the sheet metal with our hands without using any kind of pry bars or really much force. So all the purlins that go across those rafters you're looking at are all pretty much rotted just from infiltration where the screws came through. What happened is they screwed the sheet metal right to it, and they just put a dollop of caulk over each one. So obviously the caulking goes away over time, and it's there's a lot of rot up there. We did repair it, save some money by doing the demo ourselves, but that building is at its end of life. The front doors have fallen off, and another good windstorm would probably take off the other side of the roof. So the 1985 shed we're replacing, it's got a 400-ton capacity. The issue beyond the structural integrity of the building is that it only holds, with consecutive storms over a week or a week and a half, we're depleted of salt, and we need to wait for additional deliveries, which, if it's something like 2015, they don't come immediately, and we end up rationing the salt on the roads, which is obviously not good. It leads to unsafe roads. So what we're proposing with our space up there is a 3,000-ton shed. And best practice in the industry is for 1 year storage, but we don't have that space up there. 3,000 will give us enough time for sure to get through several weeks before we need a delivery. It gives us that time for ordering and delivery, even in the 2015 year. And it's also small enough that we've tried for the past 3 seasons this liquid pretreatment. It's been inconclusive, mostly because the past 3 winters have been atypical. They haven't really been bad. Last year, we didn't even spend, if any of you have looked at our operating budgets, it's the one operating budget that we always have at 125, snow and ice, because by law, you can overspend it. And it gets overspent every year. And you're allowed to make that up over a couple of years. But last year, we didn't overspend it, and it was the first time in recent memory that that's happened. So we haven't had really a good season to gauge the treatment system. One thing when we have used it is that it doesn't, the efficacy, it doesn't show based on the way we operate as far as plowing. We go out and plow after there's plow and treat after there's a few inches on the ground. Mass DOT uses the liquid pretreatment, and they pre-treat before the snow falls. when you do that, you spend a lot more on salt, and sometimes, you know, your pre-treatment isn't necessary, but you know, it's a gauge call, you know, a judgment call, and they just do it necessary. And the pre-treatment keeps the salt from bouncing off the road, and that's what all the literature generally shows. You save instead of, you know, 75% being on the road surface, a lot of it bounces off. You get about 90 to 95% on the road surface when you wet it pre-treat. But we're going out and we're salting and sanding after we already have, you know, snow on the ground generally. So we're not, you don't get that bounce effect that you would on a dry surface. So the pre-treatment is less effective or less necessary, I'll say. But we're continuing to use it. We have the saddlebags on the trucks, and we're still doing routes, and we're doing a side-by-side comparison. Does it look any different? Is it better? You can see that it's a little hard to read, but in the lower right-hand corner, we have log books on what's the snow light, depth, temperature, things like that. And then we can look at these logs at the end of the season and try to see, you know, the efficacy or any kind of notes they may have on whether it's good. So that all said, even if we had efficiencies, you know, if it worked out great and we were able to reduce our salt, there's no way we're going to reduce it by half, which is what we're requesting of our, you know, the new salt shed to be half our yearly consumption of, you know, stored salt and sand. So we'll continue to try to optimize, you know, the sand and salt treatment, but we're never going to get to the point where we reduce it to the level of what we're requesting for storage. So we'd like to continue, you know, get the storage before the shed falls down, and you know, there will be definitely tweaks to our salting and sanding. We have a new NIPDES permit. Now, there's a question I think I read from one of you on, I think it might have been on efficiencies and Brian or others, and it's you know, it's not really, we're not going more towards sand. We're actually going away from sand. Sand is considered the pollutant, not the salt in the watershed, or in the watershed going in the ocean, because it doesn't dissolve and it leads to turbidity and clogged drains, and it ends up, you know, washing out. So sand is frowned upon as far as the EPA and NIPDES, unless you're around water supply. And, you know, on King Street, we have a low salt area, and also down by our water well. But other than that, you know, sand, you know, ultimately we're going to convert more to a salt spread instead of a salt sand spread, which is currently, sometimes we do a 50-50 mix maximum. And depending on the weather, if it's mainly an ice storm, we'll have, you know, might be a 60-40 or an 80-20, just kind of a judgment call of whoever is responding to the weather, and they'll load the truck accordingly and mix it on site. So the two options we're looking at, we have the quotes for, and I think Michelle loaded them on the OneDrive. There's a metal arch with canvas roof you see on top. It's open on the front. It is fully freestanding outside of the snow of the salt storage piles. There's an interior baffle or an interior wall that sits inside of the footings. So there's almost a walkable space around the perimeter of the building that keeps the product off of, you know, the gusset plates, the metal, and it allows airflow, you know, through the area without, you know, it doesn't lead to corrosion or any kind of building issues. The trusses are all hot dipped galvanized, and all the hardware are hot dipped galvanized after fabrication. That's a big plus, as opposed to sometimes you have hot dipped galvanized components that get welded and connected, and then they're just cold galvi with paint. That's not as effective as far as a rust inhibitor. The canvas and the entire building has a 20-year prorated warranty. And so the cost that's in the estimate is just the cost of the footings, the building, and all that you see there, the site grading, the foundation prep, the final paving, electrical, or any other components would be additional outside of the quote that's on the OneDrive, and that's estimated about 200,000. The second structure we're looking at is the wood high arch gambrel. It's kind of similar to what we have on site. It's got the buttressed walls outside, and it's got an interior perimeter wall, and it's got wood trusses. That's a little more expensive. The estimate's 330,000. Again, the same foundation estimate. We'd have to do the prep, the grading, the excavation, the prep, and the final paving, and any electrical. So the request at the top, the 530,000, I just took the more expensive price and added the site work estimate of 200,000. But if we went with the Greystone, which I think may work, that it's a Minnesota vendor. They use these in Minnesota. MnDOT has them. They don't have a front door on them. You can have an option with the front door, but a lot of those, they actually recommend airflow through the building. So you said it could be added after the fact if it's an issue, but again, what you see there is probably what would be constructed on site: an open front, a vented back, and then baffle walls to contain your product. Let's see. Other than that, I think that's all the information I have on these for discussion. So I'll open it up to questions, comments.
Does the AST shed have sliding doors?
Sorry, Michelle, I'm going to tap you again. Can you open the email I sent earlier? So, and the quote that's on there is similar to the other ones. It's an itemized quote with I can tell you that each of these units can be furnished with doors. I don't know if that 330,000 is inclusive of the door.
And will either one of these fit on our existing site where the salt shed is?
Yes, bigger than the salt shed, but will fit on the existing site within the area of where you see the salt shed. So between the gas fill station and the RTF driveway.
And
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Francine.
I was just going to clarify, are they both have 3,000 tons of capacity? Are they
Yes.
equal, even though they look alike?
Which one do you prefer?
I prefer the metal. It's the wood's nice, but there are a lot of things that you can operating a heavy piece of equipment in there and driving through that opening and dumping, there's a lot of potential for striking structural members. The other one's open. It's pretty simple. I think one thing that is going to be different with our site, we're looking at kind of drilled board foundation piers, and we'd probably have more of a beam because of the shallow ledge there. But again, it's the same concept. It would be anchored, and I was surprised to hear that they have the 20-year warranty on it. Granted, it's prorated, but there's 20-year buildings out there with a canvas roof where you don't have to recanvas it every few years.
It would be interesting to know, Brian, is what's the cost of a canvas replacement?
So Brian, are you saying the canvassing part would not be part of the warranty? I didn't catch what you
No, the entire building is under warranty, including the canvas.
But you're saying they limit how much of the warranty is available over the 20-year period.
Right, it's prorated, so, divide it by 20.
Right. And is there any kind of warranty on the wooden one?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I remember looking for that right before I got on, and there's nothing in the literature about a warranty.
Brian,
You
just,
know-
just upon a quick read, I didn't see anything about doors.
Yeah, I do know that both of them can be furnished with doors. I'll need to find out if the cost is inclusive. I know it's not on the canvas. I'll see if it's on the wooden one. I was just going to say on the structural members, and we have this issue with the wood framed one at the RTF right now. Those wooden trusses are made with press plates, and over time those press plates get corroded, they loosen up, and they fall off a lot of times, and you lose those connections one by one over the years, as opposed to the welded galvanized steel.
And Brian, it'd be worth knowing what kind of wood they're using structurally on this. Is it going to be treated, or
Yeah, it's all
is
PT.
just going to be straight old spruce, which would absorb a lot of moisture and therefore possibly rot?
So you mean non-PT
Yeah,
spruce, or you mean
is it
like KD?
Is it CCA pressure treated? Is it boric pressure treated? Is it non-pressure treated? Because anything that's not treated is going to tend to absorb moisture. And the moisture is going to tend to rot the wood sooner.
Okay, we'll get that answer. I don't remember reading that in the specs, but I will get the answer from the vendor tomorrow.
Hey, Brian, it's Mike. I have a question on the site work.
Yes.
Just assuming that trying to establish concrete piers would require different site prep than, say, building a wooden building, but I'm a layperson. Bottom line question, is there any difference in the cost for site work for the steel building versus the wooden building? Or is it pretty much the same?
The steel versus the wood, it's roughly the same. The wood building, you can see just from the, it's got the buttress footings outside of the wall, so it takes a little bit more of a footprint, than the arch frame with the anchor to the piers. But in general, I'm just saying generally, the footprint of each building is 75 by 100, roughly. So that entire area would be cleared, graded, and where the footings are would be excavated by us. And where we encounter ledge, which we will, they'll be pinned, and we may end up having, kind of a pinned beam going across one side of the building as opposed to individual footings, which drilled footings.
And another question on the use and the purpose of the salt shed. Is there any way or is there a way to store any vehicles in there at any point? Or if you go up in dimensions, would you be able to put vehicles in there? Or you really just have to leave that mouth wide open? I'm thinking of the steel unit. Is that mouth, the dimensions on the mouth are such that you leave enough room in front of your piles so that your trucks can maneuver and keep the material from getting wet? Or could you store trucks in there?
No, you cannot store trucks. The size of the building is based on the tonnage, like you said, with the workable area for the front end loader in front of it, and trucks could come in and dump into the pile. There are options on the high arch gambrel. I don't know that we would have much space on site, but there are options in that building where you could put a lean-to roof on one side and store things out of the elements as far as rain and precipitation, but they'd be open obviously around the side. So that's an option on that one that I didn't even ask for on this, because the footprint of the area is such that if we put that on that side, you'd have to find a driveway to it, either from the gas station or out of the RTF, but it'd be a little tricky, but the value on that extra framing, we get some prices. I don't know.
I would say just leave well enough alone with this proposal.
Yeah, it's
Just exploring additional uses for that structure, but it sounds like, no, let's just keep it as a salt shed.
yeah, in inside storage, we're not going to be storing anything inside with the salt. It's just we could do a test to see how fast things rust to Ralph's.
No, thanks. No, let's not go there.
Any other questions on the salt shed?
Brian, I guess a few things always bother me about this whole salt shed question, as you probably do know from me. And that is, I see we have an annual use of 6,000 tons. And is that over a 5-year period, or are we including the 2015 year, which was extraordinary in that average number?
That was a 5-year period. I'll have to go back and look at it. Did it include the 2015 year?
2015 was the big year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
If it did include it, it shouldn't be there, because that was an anomaly of all years. That's certainly an anomaly. It really, the last 5 years are probably more average. The other thing is, there are a few things that bother me about this. One, as you know, I don't believe that it's easy to do hot dip galvanize and make it really work in these situations, but maybe you can. Usually it's done in a factory, but this one's got to be done on site. Maybe you can figure out how to do it, but I don't know. Doing hot dip galvanize that really works is the only solution to metal. You can't use metal in this kind of a building otherwise. You just can't. It would rot out so fast. Even
That's a good point, Ralph.
Even those plates that you're talking about that hold the trusses in the existing salt shed, those are all galvanized, and yet they're rotting out right now. So it's pretty clear that galvanize is a very touchy process unless it's really done well. But anyway, you've already figured that out. You know that. The other thing is the enormity of this thing. The current footprint is somewhere around, 40 by 60 or something like that, roughly?
Yes.
Roughly 40, 60. This was 70 by something?
70 by 100, roughly.
70 by 100. It's just so huge. And just to give you a contrast, I also drove up and took a look at the DPW salt shed just up beyond Cohasset Family Practice. And, theirs is concrete block. It couldn't be simpler. It's a concrete block building, as you probably know. And what they have done, which is clever, is they have two openings, so one for salt, one for sand. So you're not stuck with trying to maneuver a vehicle, inside the building. They just drive straight in on either one of the two openings. And that is the simplest possible building, and that's not much more than 40 by 60 also, which is interesting. It's really about the same size as ours.
Are you talking about the Mass DOT yard?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So the MassDOT building up by the old missile site was.
It's not up by the missile site. No, it's really up the access road. If you go by the medical, Cohasset Family Practice, or all the medical building, a brick building, roughly opposite King Street, where you exit King Street. If you go up, there's a garage. That's another salt shed right up there.
So I think that's a private garage by Rosano Davis. So the actual DOT yard building is up past the missile site on the flat end, and that's a multiple times larger than this, but it's
is that right? Okay.
It's a concrete poured footing wall that goes up maybe 10 feet off a grade, and then there's a wooden high arch gambrel above that, and it's
Okay.
probably a, I don't know, maybe it's probably a 30,000 ton building. It's a pretty big one.
The only thing I'm arguing at all here is, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that don't oversize this thing when you don't need to oversize it. Keep the cost, in reason, and make sure whatever we buy has the durability, because the construction is considered all of the corrosive effects of salt. And, and leveraging what Sam said, make sure that if it's wood, it's been pre-treated with the appropriate materials and so on. Our own wood building is remarkably durable. I mean, it really is. You go up there and you look at it, and the damage, of course, is the roof because of the panels. And then, of course, the vehicles that have run into it, even recently, obviously to the left of the door, another vehicle's run into it. So it's the vehicles doing the damage to it. So if you buy a building, whether it's wood or whether it's this particular one, you would like to see two openings, one for the salt, one for the sand. So you're not actually trying to maneuver inside the building and actually causing more damage. Now, that's just an opinion about this, but it just strikes me the logic of why are things going wrong in the current building? Like, why did the doors fail? The doors failed because they got hit, basically. So anyway, I'm just trying to come up with something that says, be reasonable in size. Don't do more than you absolutely have to, because the site prep's going to be huge. And that site up there now does not handle 70 by 100. I'll tell you that right now, unless you do a lot of work. And then second is make sure it's sized. So I don't care whether it's 2 times or 4 times a year, you have to, add tonnage, but be sure the tonnage numbers make sense to you. That's all. So anyway, you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, all good points. So I get notes on that. So the questions they have, and just on that, on touching on the hot dip galvanized, the one thing that they really advertise Greystone strongly is, so they manufacture all these trusses and they ship them from Minnesota direct, and the really big selling, you must have said it 10 times in the Zoom call I had with them last week, was that they manufacture, and after they do all the welding, the prep, the base plates, and everything, they hot dip it all together on site.
Okay.
In their factory.
Okay, that makes sense. Right.
Yeah, and as you said, hot dip galvanize is multiple times better than just a cold galvy slap on some paint.
Oh yeah. You probably have experience. I got a fair amount of experience in hot dip galvanizing my chains and my moorings, which I have to replace every 3 years. You'd be amazed at how hot dip can erode away like crazy. Now that's a tough environment, as you know, but boy, oh boy, steel just doesn't work in salt environments. It's a real problem. Anyway,
So if I just go over the list of questions, clarifications, I'll get back to you on. So we have average last 5 years, confirmed 2015's out of there. We're checking on the doors, reviewing the size based on the tonnage that's necessary. Wood specs, pressure treated or not, type and species, cost of canvas replacement, when and if. Is there? I think those are the major points I need to get back to you on.
yeah, no, that's good. That's good stuff. Right.
That's great, Brian.
Brian, I just a couple of things just to kick around as you sort through your answer on the appropriate size. Ralph has obviously emphasized the importance of not overdoing it, but there are 3 things that I can't reconcile in my mind, and perhaps when you come back with your response, you could consider these. The first is that the last shed was built in the 1980s. I don't know for certain, but I'm pretty sure Cohasset has not added a lot of roads since then, and I don't really think our weather patterns have gotten more severe. So somebody did the work to calculate the appropriate size shed for the appropriate size salt usage and built that shed. And I'm just kind of having a hard time getting my head around the idea that they got it this wrong. That the second thing that's nagging me a bit is that when we talked about this a few years ago, Nathan Redmond did a little bit of background research, and he pulled a report, which I know I've shared on at least one occasion since then, from the industry association. I think it was the Salt Industry Association on recommended salt use, and the math coming from the association itself, based on the number of road miles that we have in town, suggested that we were using 100% more salt than we should. In other words, 2 times the industry's recommended salt usage. And I don't think I've ever really gotten a clear answer as to why we're in such a different place. I'm not suggesting we're wrong, but it's nagging me that I don't understand why that number is garbage. The third thing that I haven't totally been able to reconcile in my head is why we need all this storage inside. I mean, obviously we need enough mix on the floor in order to handle 2 storms back to back, but I'm not sure we need enough mix on the floor to handle half a winter. I mean, the places where you source the salt and source the sand, they all store it outside, in between sort of rows of concrete blocks, and they throw tarps over it, and they pull the tarps back and scoop it up when you come to buy it. So I'm kind of struggling with why we need to warehouse it in a protected environment versus just sort of creating a stockpile and putting a tarp over it.
So starting with the last question first, is
Sure.
when you have water intrusion in the salt, it chunks, and it doesn't go through the salt spreader, and you get ice chunks, and it freezes up the machine, and you lose the spreading capacity. I know what you're saying. If you go over to the Chelsea Yards where the major stockpile is, they have it's a big operation. They have large canvases, and they keep it covered pretty regularly. And if those canvases rip, they change them regularly. I used to work right next to it, but that's the main reason everyone stores it inside, is just to keep it from freezing up, chunking up, and that's why we tried to move quick to get the roof covered up there. Again, your first question was on the salt usage. If you wouldn't mind emailing that email, I know we talked about it before, but our typical ratio is a 50-50 mix on salt and sand. We're going away. We're going to be trending away from that in the next few years because of our NIPTES requirement, and we'll be going more to 100% salt mix. I don't know if that answers the entire issue of why we're spreading so much salt. I think it was the tonnage of both salt and sand mixed. And salt and sand is really not a melter, but more of a traction, and just kind of an additive, a filler, I'll call it, that's less effective than salt. But I know I have that email in an old chain, but if you have it handy, if you wouldn't mind forward it, I can.
I'll see if I could find it.
Yeah.
There could be a very, very simple explanation, but it's just nagging me that I've never reconciled it.
Sorry, there was another point you made, Brian?
No, that was it. Well, the fact that the current shed was obviously designed with Cohasset's current roadways in mind, and seems to have really missed the mark.
I'll try to find that information. I don't know if we're going to have reports from 1985, but I mean, I know that it was built with a grant of some sort, and it may have been, I'm guessing it may have been sized based on the amount of funding available, but I will check with, we are actually just cataloging the archival storage, and Michelle is doing that for us up at DPW. Maybe we'll come across something. And I will mention, and just because I talked about it, the grant, I'm not proposing we do it here, but Chapter 90 funds can be used for building salt sheds as a road funding available. But as we're always short a little bit on road funds and trying to get our 2 miles a year, I wouldn't recommend that. I'm just giving you all the information out there.
Anybody have any further questions?
No, I just add that, while others were going through the salt shed, I was doing a little research on this John Deere 250. Brian, if it helps, it's got an 8-foot max. It's got an 8-foot clearance with the bucket fully raised up, but then tipped forward to dump. So it should, hopefully can reach up and over, and it's got a 1,750 pound operating load at that height. So it's a pretty beefy unit.
There was a yardage on that bucket? Was that a 3-yard or?
I don't know. That's on the unit itself. It's not on the bucket. So the bucket that's on this is, just looks like a standard. I don't know on the bucket.
So I mean, but 1,750 at that height is more than what we need for a scoop of
right. Right.
So
and you can probably put a bigger bucket on it. I was just pricing those. They're not that expensive. They're like $1,000 plus or minus. And in terms of, really to Susan's point, it really comes down to the hours. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these things listed for sale on this machinery trader site. And most of them are more expensive than this one. So it seems like a decent deal as long as it's got reasonably low hours on it.
Thank you, Brian.
Any more questions? Oh, that's scary. Brian, I'm just trying to look on this skid steer because you need a quick decision on that, probably. So if we could find out the hours on it, I think we've solved the lift height and the weight capacity, haven't we? Or are we still concerned about that?
Well, I know what the lift height is. It's 8 feet with the bucket in full dump position. I just don't know what the height of the truck they're dumping into is. So.
Yeah. So we need to check that.
Yep.
And the hours.
Yeah, I mean, 8 feet sounds like a lot, but standing next to a dump truck, it could be a lot. You may need more than 8 feet. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell you some of our dump bodies might be, some of our biggest dump bodies might be at that or near it, but I know for sure our smaller dumps are below that. And a roll off is definitely under the 8 feet, even if you have the biggest one. And I don't.
Okay. Well, that's your weapon of choice. So as long as it works with that and some of your smaller dumps, then it'll work.
Yeah. So ours is a big question. We'll find that out tomorrow.
What would be a maximum number of hours that we would agree to make the purchase?
Good question.
I mean, technically, I don't really know the answer, but I'll just give you guys frame of reference, right? I'll read off a couple of listings. There's an 02 in here with 2,600 hours, price is 18 grand. There's another 02 with 1,800 hours, price is 14 grand. There's another 02 in here with 4,400 hours, price is 13 grand. There's a year 2000 with 2,400 hours, price is 18 grand. And they're proudly declaring this is just out of the shop with a $9,200 bill for hydraulic and hydrostatic system. So you can incur some big maintenance costs on these. Just make sure it's a good unit. It's another 2,000 in here with 1,800 hours for 15 grand. And on down the list. I mean, you see everything from 1,000 hours up to up to 4,000 or 5,000 hours.
I guess you could ask the question, why is Pembroke getting rid of it?
I forget the operation, but it doesn't serve their purpose. I'll get that question answered as well.
Hey, Brian, I'm sorry,
Size-wise.
Brian Host.
Yes.
The offer price from Pembroke is 12,500.
Right.
In your listings that you're looking at, what would 12,500 buy us in terms of hours?
Well, let me see what the best deal would be in that price range for a 2,000.
It sounds like just listing what I heard from you, Brian, maybe like the 2,000 hour range, but
Yeah, I mean, for example, Michael, for a little bit more money, you can get an O2 here with 1,800 hours for 14 grand. Let me see something closer here. Here's a 2,000, a year 2,000 with 1,800 hours on it for 15 grand. There's another 2,000 in here with 1,400 hours on it for 14.5. So there's really not a unit, you know, at that price, at that low of a price to really
Right.
comp off of.
Would we be comfortable by telling Brian Joyce that if there's 1,800 hours or less, that we would agree?
I mean, conceptually, we could throw a construct out there. You don't want a wildly high, you know, hours unit. Most of these units that are for sale, just trying to find what the highest one is. I mean, I'd be comfortable higher than 1,800, Michael, I guess, just personally, but others may not.
Yeah, but aren't questions we should have answers to regardless of whether it's something we buy or not? I mean, and if you were going to buy a machine, you'd want to know how many hours were on it.
For sure.
yes.
It's kind of like, I look at
We'll
it,
get all the, yeah, right. We'll
So I guess there are probably half a dozen machines in here in you know, in the similar price range. You have sort of, call it 2,500 hours on it. And there are one or two that have, you know, dramatically higher hours. Like there's one on here there's an O2 on here with 4,400 hours for 12.9. It's not what I would consider the best deal on the site, but it's obviously still going at, you know, 4,500 hours.
How do we get Brian a decision? Do we have to meet again to approve? And post and so forth?
I would propose, you've given constraints of unknown answers on, with a caveat, we voted to approve this with the caveat that hours are not over X or hours are not exceeding, an average unit of this vintage. But I won't know the hours until tomorrow morning, and I can email the group.
You might consider, Brian,
And
that one thought about this would be how do you figure out hours? You might say, what is end of life in terms of hours, whatever that number is, and you would like to buy a machine with about half of that. Okay, some construct of how do you really determine whether you're going to be happy or unhappy with it? It really is knowing that you've got 10 years of additional life you want to get out of it at so many hours for Cohasset, in Cohasset, and that should not exceed in 10 years the actual total life of the machine. I mean, something like that is the way you look at that.
Great.
we really need some idea of what kind of hours are acceptable.
so we'll get you that semblance, but just going through, I guess, logistics of, you technically don't need to vote on this. It's an appropriation for supplies and equipment that's under, the, I don't know what the word is, but the purview of the town manager. So this is, this is obviously something we're running by you because it's of enduring value and it's over the 10,000 threshold. But as far as
Right. I mean, Brian, there's another issue at play here, right? Which is technically anything over 10 grand is supposed to come through capital and is not supposed to be running through an expense account. And I think everyone probably wants to be constructive, so we should figure it out. But it's if your conclusion is that you don't need capital to vote on this, I would disagree with you.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I wouldn't be, we wouldn't have, you know, if that was the thought, I wouldn't have brought it here tonight. But I
Right.
agree with you because we need your input. I'm just thinking that the formality of the vote and the appropriation is not something that's the same as the rest of the items tonight. It's
Right.
it's
just a
something that's
different
already
funding source.
appropriated and it's already within the purview of the town manager to buy this. But, you know, being open and transparent, you know, it's a capital item that capital budget should vet and review, and that's what we're doing. But you know, if you're trying to get the wording, which I was when we first started talking about this, of what you should vote on tonight, I guess we don't need to worry about that. We just need to get these answers and make sure it's
Right.
a good deal for the town.
I'm not sure how we vote on it when we still have questions.
So Brian, I've been looking at some sites that rate these used units, and the rule of thumb they use is that if it has a 40 horsepower, engine on the skid steer, after 4,000 hours, it would likely need an engine overhaul. And if it's 80 horsepower on the machine, it would require an engine overhaul at 8,000 hours. So I think this is 61 horsepower, if I remember.
64, Susan, but yeah.
So call it 6,000 hours. So to Ralph's point, you know, if we think we're going to use it for 10 years and there's 4,000 hours on it, then we have 2,000 hours to burn over the next 10 years before we need an engine overhaul. That's a simple way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's fair, Susan. I've been texting back and forth with a few of the guys here, and again, they don't know the hours, but they thought that 3,000 to 3,500 was reasonable based on the 10-year lifespan, which is right in line with what you're reading too. So, but.
Okay.
So again, you don't need to take the formal vote, but I think I'd like to hear whether you're all in agreement. You know, 3,000 to 3,500, would that be a reasonable area? Providing we get the horsepower of the unit and what the lifespan of hours would be on this.
Well, that sounds reasonable to me. I'd still like to know before we vote on how many hours are on the machine.
I
think, Brian, I think
definitely
that's a pretty simple question that should always be asked when we're acquiring anything.
I take no issue with you asking the question. I wish I had the answer right now.
Sam, let me ask. I mean, let's just say hypothetically that we knew the answer and it was 3,500. Would we approve this?
Well, I think so, but I'd like to I know Susan was spouting off a bunch of different hours, and I'd like to get into that a little further before I made a decision. I don't know how the rest of you feel.
If I could just say, I mean, and again, we don't want this thing to last only 2 years, but if it lasts 2 years and then we have to rent, it's still cheaper than renting a unit for one season.
I mean, Brian, do you think you can stall them for a week?
So unfortunately, I don't think we
I don't
have
think so.
another week. It's something that came before us they were going to surplus it immediately. We asked them for some time so we could bring it before the committee. So I don't know that we have another week.
Okay.
We can certainly ask, but I think they'll be inclined just to post it.
Yeah, because we're meeting next Monday and we could, have a vote then, which gives everybody enough time to take a look at this any way they want to. If that makes any sense. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Sam, you probably can qualify this in some way, which allows them to go forward.
Yeah,
Yeah, that you put some parameters around it, and then you ask for people to use their judgment. What else you can say? The only other one I would sort of reflect on what Brian said. Make sure that the lift on this thing is not about the weight, but in fact the height that you can actually get the snow into these are larger trucks. Otherwise, its functionality is very limited. Even if you have a roll-off vehicle, roll-off container, we mostly use trucks. So anyway, those are the two things. I'm perfectly willing to vote on this thing and say, let's go do it, as long as it has a 10-year life with a reasonable number of miles or hours on the machine. I guess that's how I'd look at it. And that it does its function. I mean, if it doesn't do its function in the way we expect it to do, that's not the machine for us. So that's all.
Yeah, well, I tend to agree with you, Ralph. But you certainly don't want to get something that can't do what you expected it could do.
Yeah. So those are the two parameters that we could say, yeah, if those parameters are satisfied. So. Just to get this thing moving.
So I'm just going back over these listings, and there's a dozen or two in here. There's one unit in here at 3,000 miles, and there's one unit, hours. There's one unit in here at 3,000 hours. There's another unit in here at 4,400. All the others are below 3,000. So that seems to be the high end of the usage pattern, at least in terms of the resale market.
What's the price point? Well, first, what's the site you're looking at? Is it just?
I'm just on I'm on machinerytrader.com, but literally I just Googled, John Deere 250 for sale, and this was the first site that came up. I knew there are 4 or 5 of these, heavy metal trading sites, but this one popped up, and I'm just kind of scrolling through it. It doesn't look like they made these much after 2000. It looks like there are a few that are 04. But the one with 3,000 hours on it is the second one down, and it's on here for 13.5. It's a year 2000 with 3,000 miles for 13.5, which is sort of the same price point. So I don't know. I guess my instinct is if we're kind of in that same hours range, that's what it's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian, I just, so you know, I did download today the same thing, a bunch of Bobcat prices. And I'm looking at a 3,900 hour, 73 horsepower for 21.9.
Those are Bobcats.
That's a Bobcat, yeah, 21.9. And then
yeah, we're looking at Deere 250s, not Bobcats.
Oh, right. Look at this. Let me see if they have any.
It's a John Deere 250. Actually, it's just a Deere 250, but.
Yes. Yeah, I'll do some more. At any rate, I agree with you based on what we're talking about, but we can confirm that tomorrow. I think 3,000 seems to be the fair spot for this price point. If it's above, maybe not so much. If it's below, then plus points.
Yeah, if it's below, then great. If it's above, then you really need to be comfortable that it's in really good shape and has been well maintained. But that said, I mean, it's still the lowest price point on this site at 12.5 or whatever it is they're asking for. There's not another unit on here at that price. They're all at least $1,000 higher.
Well, do we want to make a motion? Nobody wants to go on.
I'm happy to make a motion. The only question before I make the motion, Sam, is what's our mileage, our hours cut off? Is it 3,000? Is it 3.5?
And the lift
What's our
height.
number? Sorry?
I would just, you know, with the confirmation, I would lobby 3,500 based on what Boyd and Carl and Dan are going back on. They're saying 3,000 to 3,500 is fair.
Well, to be clear, Brian, most of these have a lot less, right? Most of them are in the 2,000s. So, I mean, I'm not averse to doing it at say 3,400. So, I mean, I'd be okay with that as a cutoff. I mean,
Fair.
what do other people think just before a motion's made? What should the cutoff number be?
Well, I'm still curious about the lift height.
Well, look, if the lift
don't
height doesn't
know
work,
that.
they shouldn't buy this. So there's absolutely a qualifier on this approval.
Yeah, I'd say if it's under 3,000 hours, I guess I'd be comfortable, but I'm also will be the first one to admit I have no idea what 3,000 hours means in the life of that kind of equipment.
Right.
I mean, do you replace the engine at 3,001 hour, or do you replace the engine at 5,000 hours?
Well, they generally come with a 2,000-hour warranty.
It's interesting.
So generally at 2,000 hours, you start thinking about replacing the engine, Susan?
It's not necessarily the engine, but that's when their warranty is up.
Yeah. Well, we could use 2,000 as a target.
Well, I don't think you'd see them on, my point is, most people aren't going to sell them before they reach the 2,000. They're probably going to not really see repairs that are going to really affect them until they get past the 2,000 hours. So that's probably why Brian's seeing a lot at 3,000 hours being sold.
Right. I get, and my question is, why is Pembroke getting rid of it?
Yeah, these are all fair questions, and I don't think I'm ready to vote on this tonight without more information about what is a good deal. How do we know what a good deal is? That's what we're struggling with. Is this a
Yeah.
good deal or not? And it all goes to how long will this machine last us, and what's the total cost of ownership? Aside from an engine, there's all the hydraulics, I imagine, all the mechanical systems on it, and how long do those last? How many hours to get, and so on. So although we really want to make this purchase for DPW, I don't think we have all the right information. And that's my feeling.
I agree with you, Michael.
If I were buying one for myself, I'd want to have all these questions answered. And Brian, I know that your fellows went over there and looked at it. But that doesn't tell me how thoroughly they really checked it out. And if that's even possible, you know, how do you look for wear and tear on a unit like that? You know, what are the telltale signs that, you know, one of the mechanical systems or hydraulic systems is about at end of life and will need to be replaced soon, you know? You know, when one brings a car to a mechanic to evaluate before you buy it, those are the kinds of things you want, you know, someone like Wayne to look at and tell you. And he'll tell you, well, Mike, you know, if you go for this, just be ready to spend X dollars in X miles, because that's going to go on this kind of a car. So that's the only parallel I can use as a lay person.
Okay.
So I
So
think you
we,
need to make a stronger case that this is a good deal for us. And, you know, one of the very strong points you've made, Brian, and I don't want to lose sight of this, is that even if we get a year out of it, we're ahead of the game. That's a pretty compelling argument.
And I know we want to get something last 10 years, and you know, we'll get the answers that everyone's asking tomorrow when Pembroke is open. But again, yeah, if we don't do this, we're renting, and if we're renting, we're spending this money anyway. It's just
Yeah, we understand.
more than this potentially.
Right. Michelle, can we get either you or Chris or somebody to call the Pembroke town manager's office and say, give us a break? You know,
Yeah.
because they're going to understand how a budget or how a finance type committee operates, that we can't spin on, you know, we can't pivot so quickly.
Sure.
That we've given a really thorough discussion and consideration, and we need more info. We are ready to buy it if we feel it's a good buy.
Sure. So
But
we've
we
been
need
in
to-
contact with them. So I have no problem calling in the morning and see if they'll allow us an extension until Monday,
Yeah, and-
until the final decision's made. I don't know if
Right.
they'll grant it to us, but I'll send you a follow-up email after I speak to them, and then we'll all know.
Does everyone agree with that
If
approach?
we've had, once we get an answer to some of these questions, is to have an email vote.
If that's fine, I'm more than happy to do that if that's cool, you know, if that's allowed.
You know, so we could maybe accomplish that tomorrow or Wednesday.
Does that pass muster with open meeting? We need some direction on that.
I'm not the expert on it, but
I know, it's not a it's not a vote
Again,
in an open meeting.
yeah. I mean, but this
I could
process
get
is,
my
I get
hand
this is-
slapped. I've had it slapped before.
Right.
So, I mean, if you do it through email, which I don't think it would be, I don't think it's valid through email, to be honest.
But
Even
then
if you
we could
email
confirm it Monday
individually,
night.
you can, yes, you can
Yeah.
put it back up Monday night, but at least we have direction to go back to Pembroke and say, yes, we got conditional approval.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Does, thank you.
So we could make a motion, or I'll propose a motion that we approve.
No,
All right,
don't
I'm
make
just
any motion yet, Michael.
Okay, fine. No worries.
The open meeting law police might be watching us tonight. You never know.
I just want to reiterate, and it may not be a good point or not, but just that this is not a formal, you know, we want everyone's approval on the capital budget committee, but you're not formally voting on an appropriation for next town meeting. This is already money that's been appropriated for equipment as deemed necessary by the town manager. So the authority is already there, the money's already there, but obviously we want you guys to take a vote in confirmation of that, but there's no, I don't know if that changes the open meeting law or anything, like, could you do it informally through email, that kind of stuff? But
So it's
I
really a,
understand what you're saying.
According
no,
to the
no.
existing, according to the existing bylaw, capital budget should approve every purchase in excess of $10,000 for a capital item that'll last more than 18 months. That's what the bylaw says.
So I think the open meeting law, I think we're getting into some really gray territory, or dangerous territory, should I say. Voting by email is not a great idea. Maybe just a blessing saying, you know, move forward and we'll take a vote on Monday. I don't know how you want to handle it. But I just want to make sure that we're not breaking
Yeah.
any kind of
Okay,
open
that's,
meeting.
Great.
thanks for bringing sense back to my nonsense, Michelle. So,
Sorry.
yeah, but at any rate, everyone will get an email with the information when we get it. And then
Okay,
you can do with it as you feel necessary. And
I don't think we want to take any hypothetical votes. I think that's risky.
Better safe than sorry. So again, there's nothing else.
Well, thank you for
Thank
your
you,
presentation.
everybody, for your time tonight. And it was a little lengthy, but we appreciate all the input, and we'll get you these answers in short order.
Brian, in my book, you have a tremendous amount of credibility, and your patience as we deliberate and your willingness to come back with answers is very much appreciated.
Thank you, Mike. Night all.
Capital
Good.
budget, does anybody have anything else?
I hate to say it, but I do. Now,
Okay.
we don't have to do it tonight. Maybe we can do it next week, but I would like to get a resolution on the question, or I have the question. How do we want to handle this question? With IT expenditures coming out of the schools, who of our liaisons should do the thorough discussion, investigation? Should it be on the school liaison? Should it be on the IT liaisons? Should it be some combination? It's 9:30. I think we're all done for the night. But with that email thread that took place earlier this week, where the school committee, I think it was the school committee, took exception to our questions, it throws me. So it's something I think that we need to discuss amongst ourselves and decide how do we want to review efficiently school IT requests.
It's a good question. I don't have a simple answer right now.
Yeah, nobody does.
Well, next week we only have rec, and that shouldn't be too time consuming. So why don't we defer a discussion on this until next week, if that makes some sense?
It does.
I know we have the schools, we've asked several questions of them. I don't expect from what they've said to have answers back until towards the end of February. So we've got some time,
Good deal.
although that goes pretty quickly. And hopefully none of us will get the COVID virus in the meantime. We'll still be alive so we can deal with it.
Agreed. That's how you opened the meeting. You said you were still alive, and you're closing the meeting with a hope that you will still be alive. There's a poetic symmetry there.
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Sam.
Second, anybody second it?
Second.
All those in favor? Susan? Susan? You're muted.
Yes, aye.
I'll say aye. Ralph, you say aye. As
Aye. Yeah.
Michael?
Aye.
Francine?
Aye.
Michelle, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going
Have
to
a
bed
great
now.
night.
Night, everyone. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.
Thank you all.